Hello everyone, and welcome to Waffle Flower Crafts. It's Shannon here, and in today's technique video, I'll be showing you a fun idea for stretching your crafting supplies. We're going to do some faux bejeweling today with Nuvo Drops and cross-stitch stamp sets. I'm going to be using this cross-stitch stamp set to make the card. This is called Stitched Cacti. It's a really sweet set, one of my favorites, and I'll be combining it with a sentiment from this Hello stamp set. This adorable set just came out in our spring release. So here's the card we're making today. You can see this cute cactus from the Stitched Cacti stamp set. Now he kind of lost a little bit of his cross-stitch look because I covered each one of those little X's with a dot of Nuvo Jewel Drop. This gives it a very neat dimensional look. Also, it adds a bit of sparkle because I'm using those jewel drops which dry clear. So this almost has a jeweled look to it, or a bedazzled look to it. Very similar, I don't know if you're familiar with the paint with diamonds. This really reminded me of those paint with diamonds. And when you can hold it to the light here, you can kind of see the sparkle. It's a little bit hard to capture it here in the video, but in real life there's a really cool crystally or jewelly kind of sparkle to this image, and it really does stretch your cross-stitch stamp sets because they don't have that cross-stitch look anymore. They have a very different look, they have a different feel, they really look crystally and sparkly, very different from that softer cross-stitch look. So it's a great way to stretch your cross-stitch stamp sets as well as your Nuvo drops. I'm going to start by stamping my image. I have all the stamps pulled off of the printed acetate sheet that the Stitched Cacti comes on. I do this because I use that printed acetate sheet to help me line up the layers of the cacti or cactus in this Stitched Cacti stamp set. I'm starting with the pot, and I'm going to use Distress Oxides for this image. I'm going to ink up the pot in Abandoned Coral. I chose to use my Misty today because this cross-stitch stamp set is a layering stamp set, and whenever I have layering stamp sets I like to use my Misty because layering stamp sets require precision most of the time. I am just stamping now that pot, and now I'll move on to using that acetate to help me line up. I'm going to line up the X's in the acetate with the X's of that stamped pot, and once I get it positioned perfectly I will use my magnets to hold that acetate down. You definitely want to make sure when you're using this technique for lining up your images that your acetate is going the right way. You want to make sure you can read the sentiments or the words. And now I'm taking my stamp and lining my stamp up with the little printed X's on that acetate image. And now I know I have that cactus perfectly lined up. So it'll be directly above that pot and all the X's will line up. So I'm using cracked pistachio here for the first layer of the cactus. I'm going to line up now again. Once I stamp this, I'm going to use that acetate again to help me line up the next layer of the cactus. This is a really great layering stamp set to try them out for the first time just because this only has 2 layers, and the X's in this cross-stitch stamp set are rather large, which is why I chose this set for today's technique, because it is easier to line up and it is also better for the making your Nuvo drops. So I just used Twisted Citron there for the ribs, or the second layer of that cactus, and now I'm going to stamp this little flower. I'm going to use Wild Honey. I could have easily just not have done this flower. It does add a little bit more difficulty later, but I just really like the look. Now the last thing I have to stamp is the face, and I'm going to use VersaFine. This Stitched Cacti stamp set comes with several faces. I think these faces are probably why I'm so in love with this set, because I just love these little cactuses when that face is stamped on there. Now that my image is stamped, I'm ready to do the bejeweling. So I have my Nuvo Jewel Drops here in front of me. I have 4 colors here. I actually only used 3 for this image. I did flash really quickly black tie enamel accents. I'll use that later for the eyes. I'm going to start with this green here, which is called Key Lime, and I'm going to squeeze a small dot of this key lime right over each one of those X's that I stamped in the cracked pistachio. And I'll continue to do this working row by row until I have all the cracked pistachio X's covered with a dot from this Jewel Drops color. The nice thing about these Jewel Drops is that they are transparent, so if you do make a mistake, you don't notice it so much. And they do have a little tint to them, so they add a little bit of color, and that's also, I think, why just having that drop over the X kind of blurs that X a little bit and does kind of change the look so it doesn't look so much like a cross-stitch image. But the clear color allows you to use the translucent nature of these and the fact that they're only slightly tinted a color. I was able to use this yellow here, limoncello, for not only the areas that I stamped in Twisted Citron, but also where I stamped in Wild Honey, which is that yellow for the flower. So I used the same Nuvo drop here for 2 different colors of ink, and I thought that was pretty cool that I could get away with that, and that's all because of that fact that these are just almost translucent or transparent. And I finished the pot in Strawberry Coulis. Now that this is dried a little bit, I'm going to take this enamel accent, which is in black tie, and do a little dot over the eyes, and that's it. I did not actually do a Nuvo drop in any of the X's that were around the eye. I might have done just a tiny little bit of the Nuvo, but I made sure to not do any of it where the actual black dot for the eye was, because I knew I was going to take some of that black tie and go over it. So now I'm ready to fussy cut them. Now that these drops and enamel accents are all dry, I probably let it dry for a good like 30 minutes before I even tried to do this, just to make sure. You just don't want to start fussy cutting this image out if they're a little bit wet or tacky still. So this cross stitch image obviously is very linear. There's a lot of 90-degree angles, and actually is a little bit easier to cut or fussy cut because of that, because I end up using the straight edge of my scissors blade, and I just kind of cut a few, I make a few vertical cuts, and then I'll make a few horizontal cuts, and that's how I end up cutting out this, or fussy cutting out this very linear or sharp cornered image. We usually fussy cut things that are very rounded, so that's just my little tip for cutting out anything that's kind of linear, like these cross-stitch images. Now that that's all fussy cut, I'm going to move on to doing my sentiment. I have a A2 top folding card base in yellow here. I'm using my Misty again, just to make sure I have that sentiment perfectly centered and straight. And I am using VersaFine Onyx Black again to stamp my sentiment. Again, that sentiment is from the new Hello stamp set. I added some foam tape to the back of the cactus, and now I'm just going to remove the back and stick him down. Just going to center it here over the sentiment and then just stick it right down. And then that card is done. Because we put so much time and energy into that cacti or cactus image, and that be the focal point, just a clean and simple image or sentiment, and then the popping up that bejeweled cactus just really brings your attention to it, and you really notice all the beautiful sparkle and shine of that image. Now I'm going to show you a little bit closer of some of the other ones that I created earlier, and I did show you these at the beginning of the video. So this one I used the Stitched Cacti stamp set again, created that large cactus the same way I did on the first card, but I also created this small little cactus as well, and that comes in the Stitched Cacti stamp set. All those images are from the Stitched Cacti stamp set. But the sentiment, which says popping in to say hi, is from the new Hoppy stamp set that just came out in our spring release. Now this one is another cross stitch stamp set. It's called Stitched Cup of Tea. It's another great set for this technique because the X's are large, just like the Stitched Cacti stamp set, and it has a lot of great tea images and worked really well. And I used one more cross stitch stamp set. This one's called Stitched Peonies. It's a beautiful set. I love it. It does have a lot smaller X's. I still was able to do this Nuvo drop or bejeweled look on top of it, but my drops are very tiny little drops. This one is obviously more involved, but I did really like the look and I wanted to show you guys even still that you can do it with some of your smaller cross-stitch stamp sets. I hope you enjoyed today's technique. If you want any more information on the products I use, please visit waffleflower.com and you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas. Thanks for watching.